Harrison Hot Springs, British Columbia, visiting the home of eminent Sasquatch researcher John Green, who was Chuck Story, Don Keating, and Mark Worth. About to head back to the conference in Vancouver, which is about 2 hours away. But we made a start around Harrison Hot Springs. Harrison Lake, a lake that is about 40 miles long and 7 miles wide, greatest width, is where the term Sasquatch was coined, where the Canadian encounters started to come to life by a writer who began writing in this area in 1904. In fact, continued to write right up until the Second World War. So hopefully today we'll get a chance to trot around Harrison Lake and pull some more stories from John Green. He's a very nice gentleman, a wealth of information, very soft-spoken, and very pleasing to listen to. And his credibility and his sincerity is overwhelming. But when you're in the heart of the Canadian Rockies, as we are right now, you can see Chuck and pan up and check out some of the ruggedness behind you. You could make a perfect habitat for some sort of man-beast anthropoid. You're dealing with 40-degree inclination, and then you got a nice little cloud cover. You've got fish. It's a very desolate, remote, and unforgiving area. And you see the clouds are scraping the tops of peaks.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. Thank you so much. Okay, it's still going. Go back down to the Crazy River, get around the mountain that's over there, and you have to cross the Harrison River and then come back up, and come back in towards the river.
The gentleman's name was?
J.W. Burns.
First researchers to actually bring forward Sasquatch reports from the Harrison Hot Springs, Harrison Lake area.
Yes, and anyway,
He wrote up
there's old newspaper stories you can find that I don't know anyone who needs to discuss an interest in this subject.
What's your favorite sighting out of everything that you research are the most anomalous or odd? I just listened to one of your books here about a woman who heard some poachers on her property, went out into the backyard with a shotgun.
I said, yeah, that one was a dandy.
And she got picked up and thrown backwards. And I've never seen an account of physical contact. Did you come across a lot of physical contact cases? Have you come across any cases where it was in an urban area or a heavily populated area outside the woods, i.e. someone's backyard, front yard, on the street?
There was one and if it's in any particular instance, you don't know whether that's true or not. There was one case that was very near the airport. If these things actually happened, and the link to it, then things got lost.
Wow. And you think somehow
about 5 reports after the week. Wow. The airport's on an island. Separated from another island, small body of water. So about a quarter of this total area involved in part of the airport, cut into the corner of it. So between the north and south island of the freedom. And in this largest part, it's actually each end of the island is a fair-sized ball. And then right across the river, and the mainland is a much bigger ball. So you could theorize that this thing come out of the big wild area into the small area across the river. And it was seen twice on a farm there, totally rural. And then it blends into the wildlife. And then a couple of days later, it was seen farther west from the island where the more people, and then the next day farther west again. And one night, right at sort of at the west end of the island, and then the next day, headed back to the other end of the island. I think that happened.
What about a case where somebody swears they hit it dead on with a rifle shot?
I don't know what to do.
Because it takes off in a dead run into the thicket.
Yeah.
People track it as the story goes. They track.
I don't.
Oh, they don't?
No, that's the one thing you don't find these people that went after it, they probably doing these stuff, but I don't know the thing of it.
Okay. So you do know people firing on it, countless stories emerge of
good solid ones, at least 3 or 4, where you have to say, well, it must have been here. And let it pick off.
have you ever differentiated between the colors, whether it be tawny, red, auburn, brown, black, white? What's the most common color that seems to...
Black would be the most common. Very dark and very sweet, that's the kind of living dark. That's the significant numbers of all 3. They're very, very similar to the black bear. You can have it black, that's what I got. See white like that.
Oh, we have some white black here.
Right here in the December.
Oh, wow. That's interesting. A lot of it encounters with it on the shoreline of a lake or river or ocean.
We have a lot of those. But of course, by far the most common encounter is if somebody sees it in a road.
Cross in front of the water.
The road is kind of far, but not very much common. And the next most common is somebody seeing something from their house. But the significant thing there isn't what the animals do. That's where the activity of the people produces the most potential risk.
Any stories of it waiting? People stockpiles of food, chicken coops? Yeah.
Not a high percentage.
But tree wrapping or making sounds of rocks and
Well,
stuff.
there's something that sounds, but I just been taking more interest lately in the phenomenon of trees falling in the woods and field areas. There's no wind to blow them over. Partly because I did one myself.
Is that a common occurrence?
No, but it does happen. And John Dimmernaud pointed out that this is a thing that orangutans do. They put a lot of effort into pushing over their snags. Sort of intimidating behavior.
Oh, and not in the construction part of construction.
No. Just a mouse and then the little toughest thing in the forest, and that's the first thing forest.
Yeah. And your encounter, what happened and what you...
One of these heights I was mentioning, a couple that they're waiting for somebody else to catch up, and just sort of free fall, only like a couple hundred yards away. And you pull up there, and you kind of hear it in. Out of the free fall.
When they were speaking, Mark was giving you the reports of stuff shooting. You never heard of...
No, I heard it dropping on trees or sticks, that kind of stuff. But I've never heard of stuff shooting.
But animals that feared, domestic animals, or people found that died dead, and...
Yeah, well that's the business of dead dogs is one of the ones I regret never having kept a file on. I can recall over the years several reports of people hearing something slam against the house and going up and finding their dog. It's obviously been slam against the door.
And Chuck's theory, and I'm sure you concur, is the reason why it would kill a dog is because that's the thing that's attractive. That will...
Well, yeah, the dog may be excited, you know.
Wow. Dog being flung against the house.
Well, I mean, you've got to figure if anything 7 to 10 foot tall running through the woods and old Yeller comes running up to it with his family, you know, less than 50 yards away. Well, I mean, what's Bigfoot going to do? He doesn't want to be detected. Grabs old Yeller, fires.
You ever heard of anybody trying to bait it?
Oh, yeah. It's not often, but it's not only success. Because we do run into stories of people who say that they see it building and they see all the time. Nobody ever produces any proof that it's right.
What is your most impressive photo or film outside of Patterson's Gilman? If you could...
One of the one Thomas describes the feeling of the rodents right over the rock. Remember that?
No, no.
Oddly enough, happened almost at exactly the same time as the Thomas moved. In the fall, it's high up there, it's cold. Larry wasn't doing anything at the moment. He was helping the fellow around back there. And didn't have anything to do that. He got time to walk down the trail to keep on. And there was some rain freezing on the trees and ice falling off. Wasn't turning on more. And we came on these two creatures, male and a female and a small one. And everybody knew we think family, but he wasn't at all sure about that because we noticed that the small one was keeping the female between them and the male. And the other side of the mother, and the male. But anyway, the two adult ones were picking up rocks and sniffing them. And so we just stayed and watched them. And they would pick up rocks, they'd put them down, they didn't just toss them aside, they'd stack them when they moved on and start a new stack. They stacked it so well. Eventually found what they were looking for, and the male then started to pull rocks out of it. It's right up on the ridge, but it's broken rocks to a very considerable depth. And he went down about 5 feet pulling rocks out of it. And then came up with a ball of vegetation, dry vegetation, pulled it apart and was ground squirrels or some kind of hibernated in them and ate them. Where you're human and eat a banana. So I heard about that within a few weeks of happening, and René and I went down there, and we got a hold of this guy at 10 o'clock in the evening and said that we would be there in the morning. We had no daylight to set up anything. We went up there, soon afterwards. It's the hole, just like a well, it's straight down, straight side. Not a big, wide pit the way the bears say that you swimming up and all that. Everybody just been reaching in. And we dropped, you know, and by the time you get 5 feet down in a stack of rocks, how do you pull them out?
Takes tremendous strength.
Yeah. And that hole is I think Houston can say it too. And Houston has found a lot more, I think. But none of them are two-sided at this point. None of them any newer. And he points out he's a wildlife biologist. But there are no areas there anymore where these giant squirrels would be, because trees have been growing up around and vegetation is fed on it and close to the top and everything. This is back 30 years ago.
And what was the location of that sightings at?
The south of Portland, southeast of Portland, south of Mount Hood, I guess. Quite high up, I don't remember the elevation. That's right on the roof.
Do you recall if you've had any sightings close with creatures being in a tree and something in a tree?
I don't remember things very well anymore. There seems to me one of the after-darking effects of that. But any specific question like that, if you want an exact answer, I can get it for you.
I'm interested in the physical contact aspect of it. The people have actually touched this creature.
Okay, well, if you want to get it to computer, you can look at all the from the left.
How many cases do you think you have on file and in the computer? Total guessing.
Oh, I know that. I'm just a bit under 2,000.
Wow.
Yes, including the continental U.S.
That is only a couple of hundred that are not in the West. I've done Michigan. Even I did Michigan, I just Wayne King had sent me really detailed report comparable to what I'm used to doing with ideas. But for most of the eastern stuff, your publication, for instance, we deliberately varied about exact location. And otherwise, run the two names out of it, I don't have much. But he was sending very detailed reports of everything.
You gotta understand, he has to be very ready to go to him at his meetings, other researchers here in the back of the room, and they listen, and then before you know it, your blink is on.
That's why I happened to Michigan first.
Yeah.
And by the way, I ended up extremely impressed with what he came with. He hasn't done much over the recent years. He hasn't found much because he's interested in he just not doing his work.
What about the creature in water or underwater?
Yeah, again,
Yeah, you're saying you have some reports of it.
Yeah.
Did you relay the story of the down there in the place where some people were fishing and saw the thing doing? No, that was Billy, I guess. He said that in one of his reports in B.C., Native Americans fishing, and they look over the side of the boat, and remember that stuff? And they saw something like, it was like doing the breaststroke underneath the boat, and they could see it was clear in the clarity of the water.
Oh, well, I have a story very like that out of Alaska. So either you between him and me,
I may have formed a high, but sure.
I think what they said was, I recall him talking, he said something about people were on a boat and they looked off and they saw one of these things come out of the forest by a beach, and it just went right into the water, and just kind of like what we would do when we start swimming. And then they said they were watching, it was a real clear day and everything, and it like went underwater and they could see just like the surface. It's like, you know, like
that is different for the one that I'm referring to with flow. It's just to find out. And it was at night.
they had the nets thrown out. Is that one where they had the nets thrown out at night? Like they
No, that's another one altogether. That's quite close to here.
okay. And the thing that
What happened?
the nets.
That Mixtac River, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The fellow by me was down there.
And one of those people involved with me.
I think I pointed that out to Mark on the way up there yesterday.
Yeah, you crossed the net.
Yeah, he did mention that. So there's another John Jr. over there. Morning.
Good morning.
we just talked about the camcorders all over the top.
You gotta get
Do you mind or?
yeah, that's Ohio.
Yeah, they're
No
very.
anyone saying it. No.
Alaska, do you have a lot of stories emanating from Alaska?
No, up in Desert maybe all of that.
About the Yukon or the Northwest Territory? Almost nothing. What is the Eskimo or Inuit tradition of the creature?
There are some that might be, but I don't know what things are.
Mm-hmm.
And they do have some figures that maybe you can know something that related to it.
I think you gotta understand it. He's Johnny. He's too big of a backyard to be poking around in Alaska right now.
Mm-hmm.
He's already got his look at his front one and look at his
Well, the lack of reports of Northwest Territories Yukon and Alaska could be because of something many people say. Oh, yeah. No investigators.
No, this one is
Why
what?
was an investigator done in Alaska by finding Bob Jack?
Another thing you gotta remember is like I call it like the West Virginia story. The West Virginia is so wooded, so mountainous, the whole state, the biggest city is probably 300,000 people, and everyone's related in the whole state, top it out. You never get, well, almost related. That's what Ohio grew up in, West Virginia. And,
And the West Virginia people said that about people in Ohio.
yeah, the West Virginia people don't even know where Ohio is. They don't even know there's other states around them. But anyway, West Virginia is very rugged wilderness area. You drive through it and really, it's just like out here. And we were talking to one of the forest rangers from West Virginia at one of our sportsman shows that Dan and I went to. And we asked him about it. He said, to be honest with you, he hasn't heard anything in 25 years. He said he might have heard of a report from a second-hand report that is somewhere else in West Virginia. He said, you got to understand, they got counties and a sheriff in each county. Sheriff has to control that whole county. And most of the counties don't even have people in it, maybe 25, 50, 100 people in a county. And they live in just a shack. And there's a little fire in the middle of the shack, that's good. And since there's really no people to pass on this information to, and there's still ridicule. I mean, one West Virginian says, I've seen a big woolly mountain mammoth or whatever it is, and it was probably your mama or something. I mean, that's what he was saying.
I've traveled through virtually every remote area of West Virginia with my basketball team, whether it's the East Fork, West Fork, and I always ask, and I told some second-hand stories, third-hand stories, but it's not only would the abandoned mines in West Virginia, but the topography would lend itself and provide an excellent cover for anything you did not want to be bothered or seen. And I remember asking one gentleman about, have you heard any encounters of a Sasquatch with a bear? Have you heard any of, I guess that would be the only creature I could think of that could pose a threat to it, or do they both respect each other?
Well, Burns had a story when you said he's seen a Sasquatch in the north.
Really? Interesting. And as far as using tools, stones to bang down a rock, as if it's, you mentioned how it was digging through a rock pile, foraging for these ground squirrels. I wonder if they have that Stone Age ability to use tools, and they have been.
No.
They don't. No indication whatsoever.
Well, you think about it, this thing, in many places, is probably just up the sand in the head. And the starfish, you chew in the back, you swim underwater. It's got all sorts of physical death. Never been under the slightest pressure to develop tools and communication. None of the things are over a million years totally differentiated humans from all the other animals. We went this route because we got started on it some way, and then we had to. Physically and our senses, and we're inferior. It couldn't possibly survive if we didn't have an animal at some time. Our animal is that we can act and conquer in ways that other animals couldn't imagine. Our communication system is totally sophisticated. I can read marks. In our case, nowadays, electronic marks. Previously, little marks on artificially made things to put marks on, piece of paper. You can tell you absolutely anything. You can know every detail of something that you never would have in a million miles, 1,000 miles on. This kind of such a thing to be made. And, most of what they like to call tools and artifacts, they're mostly weapons, really. And, we went that route and we became something totally different. And one thing that just turns me right off is this tremendous urges for many people in this house to try to relate these things to humans. Try to be some kind of human or semi-human or new human. But they walk up right, that's it. They look like that because our means of locomotion has shaped our body. And they have the same means of locomotion. So we can't. What do they need is too?
And we're at the top of the
gorilla needs is too.
And we're at the top of the food chain.
Yeah.
What do you need it for?
Do you have any cases where they use rocks to hunt it? No.
None whatsoever. I've found it interesting.
I've no case where to indicate that they can throw a rock straight. This motion is pretty sophisticated. Piece of physical wisdom underneath. Those motions are complex, and they have to be controlled in the head and the nervous system somehow. And all those muscles shift their various roles to make that satisfactory that what we're looking at.
There's physics involved with them, differentiating quickly how far is the target away, how the velocity and whatnot. No, you're right, this is very sophisticated.
Yeah, and they don't do it. They're not
Have you ever heard of anybody getting hit by one of these rods? That's what puzzles me, and I can understand what... It's just an intimate...
Another display. That's certainly what the Indians thought, I suppose. There's an Indian guy. They go up sand digging and often the low tides at night. And so they'd be on the beach for this overland and and suddenly rocks start landing. So they'd all just got back to the boat and pulled up. But they would be each corner of the hands on that beach that night and out the next. And similarly, these stories, I think I'll have them all now. It's intimidating behavior. It's not an act, but it's not an act.
I found that the story you told me was fascinating. You told all of us last night about an incident over here where a gentleman was camping in a logger camp, I believe you said. You'd come in with a canoe with another family, he had small children. He's used footsteps.
Stop.
He set up his tent right near where the trees started on a little, what they call a marine park. It's a land area too, like a slope that people kind of go. And something came around the tent in the night and
Yeah.
his foot very heavy.
Mm-hmm.
Right outside the
Smile, you two.
totally terrified. And he ran out of the tent and down on the slave and woke up the people and the cable was tied up to him.
Slept in the back, hear something enter the water, and wrap underneath the raft. It almost sounds like a sense of humor to me, not only intimidation, but just he wanted to scare, almost sinister.
Well, by that time, of course, he might have been hearing anything.
True.
In his own heart.
He was really out of it.
Yeah. But, those are the only types of intimidation you see are the rock lobbing and the chase, the foot chase. You don't hear any.
Well, there's the one incident that was mentioned earlier that we got a little patch of woods in a farm area, and somebody was shooting over on the far side of the woods, and the woman that owned that area went with a shotgun, was going 50 feet out, and they climbed over the fence that surrounds the wooded area, and as she turned around, I think, pick up his shotgun and leaned against the fence or whatever, anyway. She's facing away from the woods, and she picked up and cut back onto the other side of the fence. And all that she saw was a hairy hand on her waist. Maybe she saw the other hand or not. I don't know. No, this is hopefully, I'd say this thing is crossing between the Coast Range and the Cascade, between the Parallax Valley. It's quite a few miles wide, but just past the woods might make a logical place to spend the day if something was crossing the valley at night. And then somebody starts shooting over on one side, so the thing moves over the other side, and then somebody with a gun comes from that side. It's getting to be a bit hot, so we got something about it. Didn't make any effort to hurt anyone. And that story has couple of bits of backup to it. Her husband heard her scream. And she can't remember, or she remembers besides the scream that there was no sound. But she did scream because she came running down there. Met her, she was coming back. And then a neighbor who was on the phone me about it said that he could smell a powerful animal odor. What is he was saying about, and it was for that reason that I just dropped everything and had it down. But still, it was probably 12 hours after each smell.
As far as the food source of people think it's an omnivorous, do you feel that it prefers fish over wildlife or berries or whatever is the available food?
Opportunistic eater.
Yeah.
If an opportunity, if you're going to take it, why not?
Starting to be an impressive accumulation of stories of killing deer. Because they may indeed be pretty much a predator. Certainly wasn't the impression I had originally. But that would tie in very nicely with the increase in reports from the eastern part of the continent of the deer are also increased.
I was just going to say the 3 counties in Ohio with the most sightings, the Jackson, Tuscaloosa, Ramsey County, also are in the top 5. Like it may not necessarily 1, 3, 5, let's say, for example, of the highest deer taken during hunting season, or the amount of deer killed. So it is obviously a lot of deer, fresh meat. And if there's fresh meat available, something like that is a very what could I say? It's always on the move, other than in times of rest, but it burns a lot of calories, and you need meat, to keep your muscles strong and keep your teeth clean and things like that. I mean, you need a combination of meat and, vegetation. And let's face it, when the bushes are bare in the fall, get clean of food, they have to eat something, and they're either eating meat and they're eating some other form of vegetation, leaves, pine needles, I don't know.
But the random kills of guys, and have you come across any instances with horses that have been rescued?
Very few stories involving horses. Mostly the horses in panic. One I saw that may show up, but not on the list, but a man named Robert Milner has come several times from Eastern British Columbia. And he found a witness to it. Story that really tickled me. He was sitting on his horse, and the horse was galloping off in the field, not terribly far away. And this thing on two legs comes running across the field. The horse is galloping away from it, and the thing is running along looking at it. It's taking it easy, but it goes right past the galloping horse.
As far as screams go, is there a commonality between screams? I've heard by about 10 different screams. You've never heard one personally, but I'm sure you've only had witnesses' descriptions. And
I can't make anything out of description this time.
Have you heard any on audio tape?
Yeah. I don't know whether these are actually that kind of thing. There's certainly very interesting series of incidents down in California where there's a lot of good people. There's a variety of noise. And obviously there's lots of smoking that's really sounding off. But again, there's no proof like that.
Standing up in the trail over here, taking up the thing, and where they were, and looking at pines and flowers, and just general things, and time to get picture. There's up the area. I don't know, we're deeper into it. After we hiked up over the hill, top of the north valley, kept going up and up, still looking around. There's the area again, I'm standing on the trail where I was really thinking was up in here. But obviously there wasn't as much cold as in the season I was taking. And there's these storms of black sheep all over the place. And there was somewhere up in here. And I just saw one just to show some foliage areas. It's down and lining. All done with Jerry's on
I think that's one Patterson man. Patterson was shown or told where to go to see some of the Bigfoot tracks in 1964. That's probably the same individual as that. And those sort of pieces across and then cracks in the mud.
Yeah, It's pretty close in size. Yeah. I got it.
I wonder if you will understand. All right.
He has in Hot Springs, British Columbia, Canada.